Ancient civilizations achieved technological marvels we can barely comprehend today. By exploring 25 lost inventions that vanished with fallen empires, you will discover how close humanity came to a completely different technological timeline. Why did Roman concrete self-heal while ours crumbles? And what mysterious liquid fire burned even on water? How much of our modern progress is actually rediscovery of forgotten knowledge? From the depths of that shipwreck near Crete emerged a corroded bronze mystery, a lump of metal that would take half a century to even begin to understand. When archaeologists first pulled it from the water in 1901, they had no idea they were holding the most technologically complex object from the ancient world. It was covered in centuries of calcified deposits, its gears fused into a single, unreadable mass. Only through painstaking cleaning and modern imaging techniques like X-ray tomography did its true nature slowly come to light. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a sophisticated analog computer built with a complexity the Renaissance would not match for over 1,000 years. Its intricate assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears operated like a clockwork universe, turned by a hand crank to model the cosmos itself. Dials and pointers would have moved across its faces, predicting the positions of the sun and moon, the phases of the lunar cycle, and even the timing of eclipses. One small, beautifully crafted gear with 223 teeth was specifically designed to track the Saros cycle, the repeating period after which eclipses occur. This was not a toy for the rich, it was a serious scientific instrument, a compact universe of knowledge powered by a genius of engineering. The historian Derek de Solla Price perfectly captured the shock of its discovery, saying it was like finding a jet engine in the tomb of Tutankhamun. Its very existence forces us to rewrite history, proving that the ancient Greeks had achieved a level of mechanical sophistication we never knew was possible. They had mastered differential gearing, a principle essential in modern car axles, which was thought to have been invented in the 14th century. How many other breakthroughs did we have to painfully reinvent because this knowledge was lost? The mechanism's secrets likely died with the Great Library of Alexandria or in the chaotic collapse of the Roman Empire that followed, its intricate art of precision gear cutting forgotten. This single device proves that entire fields of advanced science can simply vanish, leaving us to wonder what our own technological path might have looked like if that ancient computer had been the start of a journey instead of a lonely, sunken end. While the Greeks were charting the cosmos with bronze gears, another empire was perfecting a weapon that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Envision a Byzantine warship, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sea, facing down an invading Arab fleet. Suddenly, a torrent of liquid fire erupts from a bronze tube mounted on its bow, arcing across the water to engulf enemy ships in a nightmare of flames that water could not quench. This was Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's ultimate naval weapon, and one of history's most fiercely guarded secrets. It was not merely a flammable substance, it was a technological terror that clung to everything it touched, wood, sails, and even the water itself, burning with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural to those who witnessed it. The secret of its composition was considered so vital to state security that Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitos explicitly commanded his son to never reveal it, claiming it was delivered by an angel to the first Christian emperor. This was not just a recipe, it was a divine gift and the key to maritime supremacy. The weapon system was as sophisticated as the chemical itself, deployed through pressurized bronze siphons that allowed crews to spray the fiery liquid in a continuous, terrifying stream or hurl it in clay grenades. Imagine the sheer psychological impact on an opposing force, seeing fire dance upon the waves, immune to their desperate attempts to douse it. The exact formula was a cocktail of lost ingredients, with historians speculating it involved crude petroleum or naphtha, mixed with substances like quicklime that ignited upon contact with water, creating a spontaneous and inextinguishable inferno. This secret died a final death with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, vanishing along with the last engineers who understood its precise mixture and delivery mechanisms. We are left to wonder what modern applications, from advanced firefighting foams to new forms of chemical propulsion, were lost with that knowledge. The story of Greek fire is a stark lesson in how a single, specialized technology can become so protected that its survival is tied entirely to the empire that created it, disappearing forever when those walls finally crumble. While the Byzantines guarded their liquid fire, the Romans built their empire to last with a stone-like substance that seemed to possess a life of its own. The Pantheon in Rome stands as a silent witness, its vast, unsupported dome the largest of its kind in the world for nearly 2,000 years. It has endured while modern concrete structures often show their age within mere decades. The secret was not just in their design, but in the very recipe of their concrete, a material that could actually repair itself. The Romans, especially in their harbors and seawalls, used a specific blend that grew stronger when exposed to the one thing that usually destroys buildings: seawater. The architect Vitruvius recorded the basic formula, a mixture of volcanic ash, lime, and chunks of rock, but the true magic happened out of sight, in a slow chemical dance with the ocean. Modern scientists have only recently cracked this ancient code. Researchers at MIT discovered that the Romans used quicklime, a highly reactive material, in a specific way. Instead of being fully mixed in, they included small, lumpy pieces of it. When seawater seeped into tiny cracks, it reacted with these quicklime pockets, forming a crystalline substance that effectively glued the fissures shut. It was a built-in repair system, a technology that actively fought its own decay. The Romans used this incredible material to construct aqueducts that channeled water for centuries and harbors that withstood the relentless pounding of waves. Their infrastructure was an investment in a future they would never see, built with a material designed to outlast the empire itself. Our own concrete, by contrast, is passive. It cracks, it crumbles, and it requires constant, expensive maintenance. Just consider how different our modern world would be if every bridge, every tunnel, every dam possessed this ancient self-healing ability. The loss of this formula following the collapse of Rome was a catastrophic step backward for human engineering. For over 1,000 years, builders struggled to recreate what the Romans had mastered, a setback that echoes in our infrastructure challenges to this day. That self-healing Roman concrete formed the bedrock of an empire, but another civilization perfected a metal that could cut through its legacies. Crusader knights returned from the Holy Land with terrifying tales of Saracen swords, blades so sharp they could slice a floating silk scarf in two, and so strong they could cleave European armor with ease. These were the legendary weapons of Damascus steel, forged from a unique material known as Wootz steel that originated in India. For over 1,000 years, from the 3rd to the 17th century, these blades were the pinnacle of metallurgical art, instantly recognizable by their flowing, watery surface patterns. But that beauty was more than decoration. It was the visible signature of an internal structure of incredible complexity and strength. The process was an alchemy of fire, hammer, and time. Smiths would take a puck of imported Wootz steel, itself a high-carbon crucible steel, and heat it, fold it, and hammer it with a precision that modern science is only now beginning to comprehend. The secret was not just in the forging, but in the very specific cooling process that allowed carbon to form within the metal matrix in a way that defied understanding for centuries. When researchers finally examined these blades under electron microscopes, they discovered something astonishing. The steel contained carbon nanotubes, tiny, incredibly strong structures that we consider a modern nanotechnology. These microscopic tubes, formed through the ancient smith's meticulous process, gave the blades their legendary flexibility, preventing them from shattering upon impact, while the sharp, hard edge could be honed to a near molecular fineness. Medieval scholars like Al-Kindi wrote detailed treatises on the importance of the ore's origin and the exact methods of production, knowledge that was passed down through generations of master smiths. Yet this profound understanding was fragile. As trade routes for the special Indian iron ore were disrupted and the Mughal Empire that patronized these crafts began to fade, the techniques were gradually lost. The workshops fell silent, and the precise alchemy of temperature, timing, and composition faded from memory. We can now create steel that is strong, even stronger in some ways, but we have never truly replicated the specific magic of Damascus. Its loss is a haunting reminder that the highest forms of knowledge are not just formulas in a book, they are living traditions, and when the chain of masters and apprentices is broken, an entire science can vanish from the world. The mastery of metal and fire that produced Damascus steel was a tangible art, but the ancient world also possessed a genius for pure mechanics that verged on magic. Within the great library of Alexandria, knowledge was not just stored on scrolls, it was brought to life through automation. Heron of Alexandria, a first-century engineer, filled its halls with wonders that feel startlingly modern. His inventions included mechanical servants that could fetch scrolls, doors that slid open automatically as a person approached, and intricate water clocks that announced the hours with moving figures and chiming sounds. He even designed a coin-operated machine that dispensed holy water, a concept that would not become commonplace for nearly 2 millennia. His most famous device, the eolipile, was a spinning sphere powered by jets of steam, a primitive but functional steam turbine that demonstrated principles the world would largely ignore until the Industrial Revolution. Another of his masterpieces was an automated theater, a self-contained puppet show powered by a complex system of ropes, weights, and gears wound around a central axle. This machine could perform an entire mythological play with tiny figures moving on and off stage, opening and closing doors, and simulating the sounds of thunder, all without human intervention once it was set in motion. The mathematician Pappus of Alexandria rightly noted that Heron's works contained many useful mechanical theorems, yet they were largely treated as marvelous entertainment or religious curiosities for temples. The Roman world that absorbed this knowledge showed more interest in maintaining its vast empire than in pushing the boundaries of this nascent industrial technology. Then came the slow, tragic decline of the library itself, a process of fire, political upheaval, and the simple decay of interest that scattered its priceless texts to the winds. With them vanished the blueprints for this automated world. The loss of Alexandria's engineering knowledge represents a catastrophic detour in human history. How many centuries of progress were forfeited when these principles were forgotten? The path to the machine age could have begun in the 1st century, not the 18th, leaving us to wonder what an ancient industrial revolution might have truly looked like. The precision gearwork of Heron's automated theater found an astonishing parallel in ancient China. There, royal processions showcased a technological marvel that defied simple explanation. A bronze figure stood atop an ornate ceremonial chariot, its outstretched arm perpetually aimed toward the south, no matter how the carriage twisted or turned. This was the south-pointing chariot, a mechanical compass that operated without a single magnet. Its genius lay in a hidden system of interlocking gears, a differential mechanism that calculated direction based solely on the rotation of the wheels. Each time the chariot turned, the gears would engage, rotating the figure in the exact opposite direction to cancel out the movement and maintain its unwavering southern orientation. It was in essence an analog computer for navigation, a machine that could reliably guide a traveler over vast, featureless distances. The engineer Ma Jun is credited with its creation during the Three Kingdoms period, and later masters like Zhang Heng refined the design to such a degree that court historians wrote the figure would always point south however the carriage moved. For centuries, these devices served as symbols of imperial authority and vital tools for military campaigns. Their intricate gear trains a closely guarded secret of state. Yet this brilliant technology could not survive the chaos of the Mongol invasions and the shifting priorities of new dynasties. As focus moved away from complex mechanics, the knowledge of how to build and calibrate these chariots slowly faded. The silence that fell over its workshops is profoundly telling. What might our world look like if this mechanical guidance system had continued to evolve in tandem with the magnetic compass? Could we have developed autonomous navigation centuries earlier? The loss of the south-pointing chariot is a quiet tragedy of redirected ambition, proving that even the most clever inventions are fragile when political winds change course. Deep within the royal palace at Nimrud, a single piece of polished rock crystal lay waiting for nearly 3,000 years. Unearthed by the archaeologist Sir John Layard in the 1850s, this small, oval-shaped artifact, now known as the Nimrud lens, presents a silent challenge to our understanding of ancient technology. It is not a jewel or an ornament, but a carefully ground optical device, its surface curved to bend light. One can picture an Assyrian craftsman of the 8th century before the Common Era, holding this crystal to his eye to magnify the minute details of an ivory carving or to inspect the fine engraving on a seal. The lens could also concentrate the fierce Mesopotamian sun into a pinpoint of intense heat, a burning glass to start a fire with a touch of light. This was not a chance discovery. It was a product of sophisticated understanding, a deliberate application of optical principles that would not become common knowledge for centuries. The Assyrian Empire was a powerhouse of administration and engineering, and this lens hints at a quiet undercurrent of scientific inquiry, at craftsmen who understood how to manipulate the physical world in subtle and powerful ways. Its very existence suggests that the foundational ideas for tools like eyeglasses and telescopes were within humanity's grasp over 2 millennia ago. Yet, when the Assyrian Empire was sacked and burned in the 7th century before the Common Era, this fragile thread of knowledge was severed. The workshops where such lenses were ground to perfection were abandoned, the techniques forgotten. Imagine the course of human discovery if this optical technology had been nurtured and passed forward. Could astronomers have mapped the heavens with telescopic lenses centuries before Galileo? Might physicians have peered into the microscopic world long before Leeuwenhoek? The loss of the Nimrud lens is a profound reminder that a civilization's collapse does not just topple statues and palaces. It can extinguish the small, precise flames of specialized knowledge, leaving the world darker for generations to come. The polished crystal of the Nimrud lens offered a glimpse into a microscopic world, but across the Mediterranean, an entire civilization was mastering the flow of water itself. Inside the sprawling palace of Knossos, a noblewoman could use a terracotta flush toilet, its wooden seat mounted over a sophisticated drainage channel that whisked waste away with water from a nearby reservoir. This was not a crude hole in the ground. It was a functional bathroom in a Bronze Age palace, complete with running water for a bath in an adjoining room. The Minoans engineered their entire city around principles of public health that would not become standard again for over 3,000 years. Their terracotta pipes were not simple cylinders. They were expertly crafted with graduated diameters, wider at one end and narrower at the other, to cleverly maintain water pressure and prevent dangerous backups. They built settling tanks that allowed silt and impurities to fall out of the water supply, a primitive but effective form of purification. A complex network of covered stone drains ran beneath the palace floors and city streets, using gravity to carry wastewater far from living quarters, preventing the contamination that would plague later, supposedly more advanced cities. The archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, who first uncovered this marvel, was stunned by what he found, calling the sanitary arrangements of a standard not attained until modern times. This was a society that understood the vital link between clean water, waste removal, and public health. Yet this entire system of urban wellness vanished when the Minoan civilization collapsed, likely shattered by a cataclysmic volcanic eruption and subsequent invasions. The knowledge of their hydraulic engineering was buried under ash and rubble. How many millions of lives might have been saved over the ensuing centuries if this blueprint for urban sanitation had survived? The loss of Minoan plumbing was a profound regression, one that condemned later civilizations to relearn through centuries of plague and pestilence, a lesson the ancient world had already mastered. These floating cities of wood were feats of engineering that defied their time. In the early 15th century, Admiral Zheng he commanded a fleet of treasure ships whose scale remains almost unbelievable. The flagships stretched over 400 feet from stern to stem, their 9 masts towering over the water, carrying crews that numbered in the thousands. These were not just ships, they were mobile embassies and instruments of imperial power, navigating from China to the coast of East Africa decades before Portuguese caravels would tentatively explore the African coastline. The technology that made these voyages possible was staggeringly advanced. Their hulls were divided into multiple watertight compartments, a safety feature that would not appear in European shipbuilding for another 400 years. If one section was breached, the others remained sealed, keeping the colossal vessel afloat. They employed balanced rudders that could be raised or lowered, giving these leviathans a surprising agility in unpredictable seas. Chinese star charts and navigation techniques guided them across vast, empty stretches of ocean with a confidence that European explorers lacked. Official records poetically declared that these fleets sailed the Western Ocean like a cloud across the sky, a testament to their grandeur and reach. For nearly 3 decades, from 1405 to 1433, these voyages connected a vast network of trade and diplomacy, bringing back giraffes to the imperial court and establishing Chinese influence across half the world. Then, with a single political decree, it all ended. The Hongxi Emperor and later the Xuan Emperor turned the empire inward, deeming the voyages too expensive and their influence too foreign. The great treasure fleets were dismantled, the shipyards fell silent, and perhaps most tragically, the detailed records and blueprints were systematically destroyed by court officials who saw them as a dangerous distraction. The knowledge of how to build and navigate these maritime giants was erased. This was not a loss from invasion or natural disaster, but a deliberate act of technological suicide. How would our world map look if Chinese junks had rounded the Cape of Good Hope and met European ships in the Atlantic? The vacuum they left behind was quickly filled by other powers, setting a completely different course for history. It is a sobering lesson in how the greatest inventions can be doomed not by their failure, but by a simple change in political will. That deliberate silencing of Chinese shipbuilding finds a haunting parallel in the mountains of South America, where an empire managed its vast domains without a single written word. High in the Andes, Inca administrators tracked the movements of millions of people and the contents of immense storehouses using nothing but intricate arrangements of knotted strings. These were the Quipus, a complex communication system that turned colored cords into a three-dimensional ledger of the empire. Each Quipu consisted of a main cord from which dozens of pendant strings dangled. Each string dyed a specific color. The information was encoded in the language of knots, the type of knot, its position on the string, and the sequence in which they were tied, forming a sophisticated code. A decimal system was at its heart, with different knot types representing units, tens, hundreds, and beyond. A figure 8 knot might mean 1, while a long knot with multiple turns could signify 2 through 9, and a single overhand knot stood for a multiple of 10, 100, or 1,000 depending on its placement. The Spanish chronicler Garcilasco de la Vega, who grew up in the aftermath of the conquest, wrote with admiration that these knotted records could preserve laws, ceremonies, and business accounts with a precision that rivaled any written ledger. They were the administrative backbone of an empire stretching thousands of miles, allowing runners to carry accurate data from the farthest provinces directly to the capital at Cusco. But the true depth of the Quipu is only now being understood. While many were clearly numerical, tracking tributes and census data, recent research suggests some may have held narrative information, recording stories, songs, and historical events. They might represent a complete, three-dimensional writing system, unique in human history, where the color of the string, the material it was made from, and the spin direction of the yarn all carried specific meaning. This entire information technology was systematically dismantled by Spanish colonial authorities. Recognizing the Quipu as a source of indigenous power and memory, they condemned them as idolatrous objects and ordered them burned by the thousands. The knowledge of how to read and create them was suppressed, and the special class of Quipu masters, the Quipucamayos, were stripped of their authority. What profound insights into Inca mathematics, their understanding of astronomy, or their own history have we lost forever in those ashes? The silent, coiled strings in museum cases today are not just artifacts, they are the ghosts of a lost language, a stark testament to how conquest can erase not just people, but entire systems of thought. The silent knots of the Inca Quipu recorded a vast empire, yet another civilization mastered a different kind of control, not over information, but over the very climate of the desert. In the heart of the arid Persian landscape, around 400 years before the Common Era, stood towering domes of clay that defied the blistering sun. These were the Yakhchals, the ancient ice pits, and they were not merely storage cellars but sophisticated machines that manufactured cold. Their design was a masterpiece of passive thermodynamics. A Yakhchal consisted of a massive subterranean storage chamber, often dug deep into the earth, topped by a towering conical dome that reached up into the dry desert air. This dome was not solid. It was constructed with a special heat-resistant mortar made from sand, clay, and other materials that provided incredible insulation. The secret, however, lay in its integration with other Persian technologies. Often, these structures were connected to qanats, the underground aqueducts that channeled cold water down from the mountains. But the real magic happened on cold, clear winter nights. Shallow channels leading to the Yakhchal would be filled with this qanat water. Under the vast desert sky, the water would lose its heat to the atmosphere through a process called radiative cooling, often freezing solid by dawn. Workers would then break up this ice and pack it deep into the storage pit. The thick, insulated walls and the clever wind catchers on the dome kept the scorching summer heat out, allowing the ice to remain frozen for months, even through the most intense heat waves. This was not a small-scale operation. Some of these structures could store vast quantities of ice, creating literal mountains of it in the desert, as celebrated by Persian poets. This technology transformed daily life and luxury. It allowed for the preservation of food far from harvest time and made possible chilled delicacies and desserts for Persian royalty that would have been unimaginable elsewhere in the ancient world. The loss of this elegant, energy-free cooling system was a slow process. As the Persian Empire faced successive invasions and its supporting infrastructure of qanats and specialized builders decayed, the knowledge of how to construct and maintain these desert refrigerators gradually faded. Imagine a world where this passive cooling technology had spread and evolved, perhaps even merging with other engineering traditions. Could we have developed sustainable, zero-energy refrigeration centuries ago, fundamentally changing global food distribution and storage? The silent, empty domes that still dot the Iranian plateau are monuments to a brilliant, practical science that was lost not in a single cataclysm, but in the slow unraveling of the civilization that nurtured it. High above the jungle floor, Mayan astronomers tracked the slow dance of planets with a precision that feels almost impossible without a telescope. In the city of Kapon, priests would climb into observatories carved from stone, their eyes fixed on the brilliant point of light that was Venus. They did not merely watch the sky, they calculated its rhythms, developing a cosmology so advanced it guided every aspect of their world, from when to plant maize to when to wage war. Their mathematical system was the foundation of this genius, a base 20-decimal system that included something revolutionary, the concept of zero. This abstract idea, represented by a shell glyph, allowed them to perform complex calculations and conceive of vast spans of time. They used this mathematical power to weave together multiple, interlocking calendars. The 260-day sacred round meshed with the 365-day solar year, and both were synchronized with the 584-day cycle of Venus. This was not just timekeeping, it was a grand, cosmic clockwork. The proof of their mastery survives in one of the few Mayan books to escape destruction, the Dresden Codex. Within its pages are Venus tables that remain accurate to within 2 hours over a period of 500 years, a feat of observational astronomy that European stargazers would not match for centuries. Their architecture was this knowledge made stone. The Caracol at Chichen Itza is a spiraling tower whose narrow windows are precisely aligned to frame the extreme positions of Venus on the horizon, and the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan casts a shadow during the equinox that mimics a serpent slithering down its steps. This was a civilization that lived and breathed celestial mechanics. Then came the Spanish conquest, and with it, a systematic campaign of cultural destruction. Catholic missionaries, viewing the Mayan codices as works of the devil, gathered these priceless books and burned them in public squares. In a single, fiery act in Mani in 1562, Bishop Diego de Landa oversaw the destruction of thousands of Maya records, an incalculable loss that erased entire libraries of astronomical data, historical records, and scientific understanding. The few codices that survived, like the Dresden, are mere fragments of a vast intellectual universe. What profound insights into the nature of our solar system died in those flames? How much earlier would we have understood planetary motion if this pre-telescopic knowledge had flowed into the scientific revolution? The silent stone observatories in the jungle now stand as haunting reminders that the destruction of knowledge is a violence that echoes across centuries, leaving us to piece together a cosmos from the ashes. The lingering scent of Egyptian perfume was a luxury powerful enough to trouble a Roman emperor's treasury. Within the gilded halls of Cleopatra's palace, the air itself was an instrument of power, thick with the aroma of lotus, lily, and myrrh, blended into fragrances of such complexity that their formulas have never been replicated. These were not simple floral waters, they were the product of a chemical science refined over 3,000 years. Egyptian perfumers were master extractors, employing techniques like enfleurage, where fragile flower petals were pressed into layers of fat to capture their essential oils, or maceration, steeping aromatic materials in hot oils to draw out their soul. They even pioneered early forms of distillation using specialized equipment to coax the purest scents from resins like frankincense. This expertise extended to their legendary cosmetics, where beauty and medicine were inextricably linked. The famous kohl that lined the eyes of pharaohs and commoners alike was more than a fashion statement. Medical papyri, like the Ebers papyrus, reveal that these dark powders often contained galena, a lead-based mineral. Modern research suggests that, despite its toxicity, this formulation may have actually provided a protective, antibacterial barrier against the relentless desert flies and the blinding sun, a practical defense masquerading as adornment. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote with a mixture of awe and irritation about the Egyptian monopoly on luxury, lamenting the staggering sums of Roman wealth that flowed down the Nile in exchange for these scents that clung to the skin for days on end. Yet this vibrant industry, this deep understanding of botany and chemistry, could not survive the slow erosion of Egyptian sovereignty. As control of the Nile passed from the Ptolemies to the Romans, and later to other foreign powers, the royal and temple workshops that had perfected these arts were shuttered. The precise recipes, the exact temperatures and timings, the knowledge of which local plant produced which specific effect, all of this specialized craft knowledge gradually faded from memory, victim to a broken cultural chain. What if this ancient dermatology and perfumery had been allowed to flourish and cross-pollinate with other scientific traditions? Could the foundations of modern organic chemistry have been laid centuries earlier? The lost scents of Egypt are a poignant reminder that some of the most sophisticated knowledge is held not in grand libraries, but in the hands of artisans, and when their tradition is broken, that wisdom evaporates like a precious fragrance into the open air. Even as the last scents of Egyptian perfume faded, the Roman appetite for another kind of luxury was growing, one born from the ashes of their greatest rival. The farms of Carthage were legendary, their fields so productive they turned North Africa into the breadbasket of the entire Mediterranean. This agricultural miracle was not an accident of nature, but the result of a deep, scientific understanding of the land, meticulously documented in a 28-volume encyclopedia by the writer Mago. When Rome finally destroyed Carthage in 146 before the Common Era, they recognized the immense value of this knowledge. The Roman Senate itself ordered the work to be translated into Latin, preserving it not out of respect but for pure, practical utility. Roman agricultural writers like Varro and Columella would later quote these Punic sources extensively, praising techniques for olive cultivation and vineyard management that were, by their own admission, more advanced than their own. The Carthaginians had mastered their environment through generations of observation. They built intricate terracing to farm hillsides, engineered sophisticated irrigation channels to tap underground springs, and developed soil amendment techniques that allowed them to cultivate semi-arid regions with incredible success. This was a complete system, a science of survival honed over centuries, yet this deliberate preservation was also a prelude to a deeper loss. As vast Roman estates, the latifundia, replaced the traditional Punic farms, the context for this knowledge began to vanish. The new Roman overseers often lacked the nuanced understanding of the local environment that the Carthaginian texts prescribed. They applied the methods selectively, or not at all, focusing on short-term extraction over long-term sustainability. The delicate balance of crop rotation, the specific knowledge of which soil amendments worked best in which microclimate, the intimate understanding of water management, these subtleties were the first to be forgotten. The manuals remained, but the living tradition that gave them meaning was broken. What if Rome had fully absorbed this wisdom instead of merely cataloging it? Could the integration of Carthaginian dry land farming with Roman engineering have created an agricultural revolution capable of preventing the soil exhaustion that later plagued the empire? The fate of Mego's library is a classic story of conquest, where the victor salvages the blueprint but loses the soul of the technology, ensuring that even in preservation, something vital is irretrievably lost. The fate of Carthaginian soil science was a quiet loss, but another wonder vanished with such spectacle that its absence echoes through history. High above the Mesopotamian plains, the hanging gardens of Babylon presented a vision of impossible greenery, a mountain of terraced trees and vibrant flowers built for a homesick queen. Ancient writers strained to describe the sight, a lush, artificial ecosystem thriving in the heart of a sun-baked empire. Its survival depended on a hidden hydraulic heart, a watering system so ingenious that Greek historians could only guess at its workings. Strabo recorded that machines raised water in great abundance from the river, though no one outside could see it, pointing to a concealed network of engineering genius. This was not manual labor with buckets, but a continuous, automated flow. Historians now theorize it used a chain pump, an endless loop of buckets on a rotating belt, or perhaps a series of Archimedes screws, those brilliant spiral tubes that lift water when turned. The system may have employed norias, massive water wheels powered by the current of the Euphrates itself, lifting water from one terrace to the next in a self-sustaining cycle. Each terrace acted as a reservoir for the one above it, a cascading fountain of life that defied the desert climate. This was Babylonian engineering at its absolute peak, a mastery of mechanics and hydraulics created to demonstrate the power of a king to reshape nature itself. Yet this celebrated wonder did not just crumble, it evaporated from history along with the empire that built it. As Babylon fell into ruin under Persian and later Greek rule, the specialized knowledge required to maintain its mechanical core was lost. The gardens vanished so completely that archaeologists still debate their precise location. What profound insights into ancient mechanical power and sustainable agriculture were lost when those hidden pumps fell silent? We are left with a haunting question: how could one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world disappear without leaving a single, certain blueprint behind? Its story is the ultimate proof that even our most magnificent creations are mortal, dying with the civilizations that gave them life. Deep in the sweltering Mesoamerican jungle, players engaged in a ceremonial game with a ball that seemed to possess a life of its own. This was not a heavy sphere of stuffed leather or carved wood, but a solid, resilient ball of rubber, bouncing with an energy that defied everything Europeans knew about materials. The Olmec civilization, flourishing over 3,000 years ago, were the original masters of this technology, the first to unlock the secret of transforming the sticky, white sap of the rubber tree into a durable, bouncy substance. Their process was a stroke of chemical genius. Long before the word polymer entered the scientific lexicon, they discovered that by mixing raw latex with the juice of the morning glory vine, a specific variety called Ipomoea alba, they could create a stable, elastic material. The sulfoxide compounds in the vine juice acted as a coagulating and strengthening agent, effectively vulcanizing the rubber over 1,600 years before Charles Goodyear would patent his own process in the 19th century. This was not a single-use trick, it was a foundational industry. At sites like El Manotti, sacred sacrificial bogs have yielded perfectly preserved rubber balls, offerings to the gods that have survived for millennia, providing tangible proof of their sophisticated manufacturing. The Olmec used this material for more than just the iconic ball game. They crafted waterproof textiles, sealed containers, and created ritual objects that required both flexibility and strength. This knowledge became part of the cultural inheritance of Mesoamerica, passed to the Maya and the Aztecs, who prized rubber for its almost magical properties. Yet when Spanish conquistadors witnessed the bouncing balls, they were more fascinated by the novelty than the underlying science. They saw no immediate military or economic application for this strange, elastic substance, especially when compared to the metals and textiles they sought. European materials and priorities supplanted indigenous knowledge, and the precise formula for processing the latex, the exact proportions, and the specific type of morning glory required faded into obscurity. What if this early breakthrough in polymer science had been carried back to Europe and studied? Could the age of plastics and synthetic materials have begun not in the 19th century, but in the 16th? The loss of Olmec rubber processing is a powerful example of how an entire branch of material innovation can be halted not by its inadequacy, but by the simple fact that the new rulers of the land failed to recognize its value. The silent, coiled energy of a Nubian composite bow was a marvel of ancient engineering, a weapon so effective it shaped the very tactics of its enemies. These were not simple staves of wood, but intricate laminations of multiple materials, each chosen for its unique physical properties. A core of flexible wood formed the bow's backbone, while its belly, the side facing the archer, was layered with animal horn, a substance that excels under compression. The back of the bow was then bound with sinew, a material that provides incredible tensile strength. When the archer drew the string, the horn compressed and the sinew stretched, storing phenomenal energy that was released in a snap, launching an arrow with significantly more force and range than any simple wooden bow could achieve. The recurved shape, curving away from the archer at the tips, acted like a set of pre-loaded springs, making the bow both incredibly powerful and surprisingly compact, a perfect weapon for a mounted warrior. The arrows themselves were a toolkit of destruction, featuring different types of heads, from broad, barbed points designed to inflict terrible wounds on unarmored foes, to narrow, armor-piercing tips that could find the weak points in a Roman legionary's lorica segmentata. Roman historians wrote of these archers with a mix of fear and professional respect. Strabo did not just note their ambidextrous skill, he observed that their arrows were renowned for their exceptional deadliness, a direct result of this advanced weapon craft. The knowledge required to build such a bow was immense, a careful alchemy of selecting the right woods and animal parts, understanding the precise glues and bindings that would hold under stress, and mastering the slow curing process that gave the finished weapon its legendary resilience. This was not a technology that could be quickly learned. It was a specialized craft passed down through generations of artisans, deeply embedded in the culture and military structure of the Nubian kingdoms like Kush. As these kingdoms were gradually absorbed into other empires, first by Meroe and later through the expansion of Axum and the influence of Christianity, the traditional warrior societies that demanded these weapons began to change. The specific social and economic structures that supported the bowires and fletchers, the masters of this lethal art, slowly dissolved. Without royal patrons and a constant demand from the military, the intricate, hands-on knowledge of how to season the wood, treat the sinew, and laminate the components under just the right conditions faded from memory. What could modern materials science learn from the precise molecular bonding of these ancient glues? or the optimal layering of natural composites for maximum energy storage. The silent disappearance of Nubian archery technology is a stark lesson that an invention's survival depends not just on its effectiveness, but on the survival of the entire ecosystem, the culture, economy, and social hierarchy that brought it into being and kept its secrets alive. This same principle of a lost technological ecosystem unfolded on the banks of the Indus River over 4,000 years ago. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were not mere settlements. They were masterpieces of urban design, their grid-patterned streets laid out with an almost modern precision. Walking through these cities around 2,500 years before the Common Era, a resident would have experienced a level of civic planning that medieval European capitals would fail to match. Every brick was standardized to a perfect 4:2:1 ratio, a uniformity that speaks to a powerful central authority and a shared vision for construction. The true genius, however, lay beneath their feet, each house connected to a network of covered drains that ran under the main streets, channeling wastewater away from homes and into larger brick-lined sewers. Many residences even had their own bathing areas with floors that sloped toward a drain, a private luxury that kept the entire city clean. At the heart of Mohenjo-Daro stood the Great Bath, a massive, watertight public facility that likely served both ritual and social purposes, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering with its careful system of water supply and drainage. The archaeologist John Marshall, who first uncovered these wonders, was left in awe, declaring it a system of town planning so scientific that nothing comparable existed in the ancient world. This was not haphazard growth, it was a deliberate, coordinated creation. The civilization used standardized weights and measures across a vast geographical area, suggesting a unified system of trade and administration that supported these large, densely populated urban centers in remarkable comfort and hygiene. Then, around 1900 years before the Common Era, this entire system collapsed. The reasons are still debated: a shifting river course, climate change, or perhaps social upheaval. Whatever the cause, the knowledge did not merely fade, it was utterly extinguished. The concept of city-wide sanitation, of planned neighborhoods and public works, vanished from the historical record. How would the story of urban life have changed if these blueprints for healthy, organized cities had traveled west to Mesopotamia or east to China? The profound silence that followed the Indus Valley's decline represents one of humanity's greatest technological regressions, forcing countless future generations to rediscover, through millennia of trial and error, the simple, brilliant idea of a clean and planned city. Heron's spinning sphere of steam was a glimpse of a future that never arrived. Within the workshops of Alexandria, his eolipile proved that steam could perform mechanical work, a principle that would not be harnessed for industry until the 18th century. Yet this was not his only venture into steam power. His writings detailed devices where steam pressure opened temple doors with a dramatic hiss, or caused statues to pour libations, creating divine theater for worshippers. The mathematician Pappus of Alexandria rightly noted these inventions demonstrated the power of heated water and air, yet their potential was never realized. The fundamental physics were understood, the basic components existed, but the social and economic landscape offered no incentive for their development. Why build a steam engine to pump water or power a mill when you have access to vast, inexpensive slave labor? The Roman economy was built on human muscle, not mechanical innovation. Furthermore, the metallurgy of the time could not produce the precisely fitted pistons and high-pressure boilers required for a practical engine. Their bronze and copper were sufficient for temple wonders, but not for the relentless demands of industrial work. This was a technology trapped at the theoretical stage, a brilliant idea without a practical application to push it forward. So the eolipile remained a fascinating curiosity, a spinning toy in a world not yet ready for the power it represented. The Industrial Revolution was delayed by nearly 17 centuries, not for a lack of ideas, but because the right conditions for their growth simply did not exist. It is a profound lesson in how a society's structure, its very economy and priorities, can act as an invisible barrier, preventing a revolutionary technology from ever taking root. The same fragility that doomed the Nubian bowier's craft also shattered one of the ancient world's most brilliant arts, the glassmaking of Mesopotamia. In the workshops of Assyrian cities like Nimrud, artisans created vessels that glowed with the deep blue of lapis lazuli and the fiery red of copper, their surfaces swirling with intricate patterns of contrasting colors. This was not simple glassblowing, a technique that would not be invented for centuries, but something called core forming. A craftsman would start with a lump of clay shaped into the rough form of a vessel, then carefully wind strands of molten glass around it, smoothing and shaping the pliable material with tools while it was still hot. They would roll the hot glass over pre-made rods of colored glass to create delicate zigzags or feather patterns, a process requiring incredible speed and precision before the material cooled and hardened. The final step was just as critical, the slow, controlled cooling of the finished piece in a special oven called a layer to prevent the glass from cracking from thermal stress, a secret of annealing that is fundamental to all modern glasswork. This was not guesswork, it was a sophisticated chemical science. Cuneiform tablets from the library of King Ashurnasirpal II, dating to the 9th century before the Common Era, contain precise recipes. They detail how adding cobalt would produce a brilliant blue, how copper created turquoise or red, and how manganese could be used to decolorize the glass, removing unwanted tints. They understood that the chemical properties of their additives directly affected the final product, a foundational principle of materials science. The quality and complexity of their work was so consistent that their glassware became a prized trade item across the Mediterranean, influencing cultures from Egypt to Greece. Yet this vibrant industry, built on generations of accumulated chemical knowledge, could not survive the relentless waves of invasion and political collapse that swept through the region. As the Assyrian Empire fell to the Babylonians, and later as the entire Mesopotamian political order fragmented, the stable royal and temple workshops that supported these master artisans were disbanded. The precise recipes, the nuanced understanding of heating cycles, and the delicate hand skills required for core forming gradually faded from memory. What might have been the next step? Could these early chemists, with another few centuries of peaceful development, have created clear optical glass, laying the groundwork for lenses and telescopes far earlier? The silence that fell over those workshops represents more than a lost art. It was a severed branch of human discovery, proving that even the most beautiful and useful technologies are vulnerable to the tides of history. That same mastery of glass and light found its ultimate expression not in a small workshop, but towering over a harbor. The Pharaohs of Alexandria was far more than the world's first lighthouse. It was a monumental optical computer. At its summit, alongside the eternal flame, sat a device of polished bronze so advanced its principles would baffle the world for centuries. This was not a simple reflector, but a massive, curved mirror engineered to harness and project light with stunning efficiency. During the day, this mirror would capture the intense Mediterranean sun, focusing its rays into a piercing beam aimed at the horizon. At night, it would gather the flickering light from a massive furnace and reflect it outward, creating a guiding star for sailors that could be seen from over 30 miles away. The mathematician Fibonacci, who studied in the Arab world and saw the lighthouse before its final ruin, wrote with awe of a mirror of wonderful construction, a testament to an optical science far beyond the simple polished metal of his time. Some ancient accounts even suggest this mirror served a dual purpose, its curvature and placement allowing guardians of the harbor to spot and identify the sails of approaching ships long before they reached the port, an early warning system that secured the wealth of an empire. The loss of this technology was a slow, crushing collapse. A series of earthquakes from the 10th to the 14th century shook the Great Tower to its core. The final quake in 1303 dealt the fatal blow, reducing the upper sections to rubble. With each tremor, the precise alignment of the mirror was destroyed, and with the final collapse, the secret of its curvature and composition was buried. The specialized guild of engineers who maintained it was scattered, their knowledge dying with them. This was not merely the loss of a building, but the loss of a lens through which an entire branch of applied optics was viewed. If the principles of that great mirror had been preserved, if its design had been studied and iterated upon, could the telescope have been invented not in 1608, but in 1308? The silent darkness that fell over the Alexandrian coast was not just an absence of light, it was an absence of a future that was never allowed to dawn. The crucibles that forged Damascus steel held a secret born far from the deserts of Syria, in the ancient ironworking centers of southern India. Here, for centuries before the Common Era, metallurgists perfected a recipe for a metal that seemed almost magical. They would pack specific iron ores with carefully selected organic materials, like leaves and wood, into sealed clay pots. These crucibles were then heated for hours in charcoal-fired furnaces, a controlled environment that allowed the iron to absorb just the right amount of carbon from the organic matter, transforming it into a high-carbon steel ingot known as Wootz. This was not a simple smelting process. It was a precise chemical reaction contained within a ceramic vessel, a deliberate infusion of carbon that gave the raw steel its unique potential. The value of this material was recognized across the ancient world. A first-century navigation guide, The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, lists Indian iron and steel among the most prized exports sailing to Roman Egypt, a testament to its renown for superior quality and workability. But the true wonder of Wootz steel was only visible after the ingot was forged by a master smith. When the cooled puck of metal was reheated and hammered with incredible skill, the internal structure of the steel would align into those famous swirling patterns. These bands were not merely decorative, they were the visible evidence of a microscopic miracle. Modern materials scientists, using electron microscopes, discovered that this ancient steel contained carbon nanotubes, incredibly strong, tiny structures that formed within the metal during its unique production and forging process. These microscopic tubes, a form of nanotechnology we are only now mastering, are what gave the finished blades their legendary combination of a razor-sharp edge that resisted chipping and a flexible spine that would not shatter. This was a material science achievement of the highest order, a product of generations of observation and refined tradition, yet this profound knowledge proved fragile. As political power shifted in India and European colonial powers established control, the economic and social structures that supported the specialized Wootz production centers were dismantled. The precise recipes, the specific types of ore, the exact temperatures and timings for the crucible process, all of this intricate, hands-on knowledge began to fade, preserved only in fragments and failing memories. The systematic study of this nanotechnology-enhanced steel never happened. What could we have learned about material design if this ancient process had been analyzed and understood at its peak? The loss of Wootz steel is a quiet tragedy of eroded tradition, a reminder that the most advanced knowledge can be written not in books, but in the rhythm of a hammer and the color of a flame, and when that rhythm stops, the knowledge can disappear forever. Roman military surgeons worked with a precision that would not be common again for 1500 years. On a battlefield, a medicus could open a kit filled with specialized tools, each designed for a specific, life-saving purpose. There were bronze speculums for examining wounds, finely crafted bone drills for cranial surgery, and complex extraction forceps for removing arrowheads with minimal damage to the surrounding tissue. The sheer variety of these instruments, preserved in the volcanic ash of Pompeii, reveals a startlingly modern approach to medicine. These were not crude implements, but the products of a systematic understanding of human anatomy and surgical principles, many of which were meticulously documented by the physician Galen. He described intricate procedures, from couching for cataracts where the lens of the eye was physically manipulated, to trepanation, the delicate drilling of a hole in the skull to relieve pressure from a head wound. There is even evidence of early plastic surgery techniques to repair damaged ears and noses. This was not scattered, individual genius, but an organized system. The Roman military developed standardized field kits and established a structured medical corps to support its legions across the vast empire, creating a mobile, effective healthcare system that was centuries ahead of its time. All of this knowledge, recorded in texts and reinforced through practice, formed a formidable body of medical science. Yet, with the fragmentation of the Roman Empire and the long societal transformations of the Middle Ages, this entire edifice of medical knowledge crumbled. The sophisticated texts were lost, ignored, or simply could not be understood by later generations lacking the context. The specialized craft of manufacturing those precise bronze tools vanished. Consider the profound setback this represented. How many millions of lives might have been saved, how much human suffering avoided, if the knowledge of sterile procedure, anatomical accuracy, and complex surgical intervention had been continuously built upon instead of being lost for a millennium. This disappearance forced European medicine into a dark age, where techniques that were routine for a Roman army surgeon had to be painfully and slowly rediscovered during the Renaissance and beyond. It stands as one of history's most devastating regressions, a stark lesson in how easily the most practical and life-giving arts can be erased by the collapse of the civilization that nurtured them. A simple clay pot, sealed for nearly 2,000 years, held a secret that seems to defy the timeline of human discovery. Found in the ruins of a Parthian village near modern Baghdad, this unassuming artifact consisted of a terracotta jar housing an iron rod, carefully inserted into a rolled copper cylinder. If this assembly was filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, it would become a basic battery capable of producing a small but measurable electric current. The German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who first studied these objects in the 1930s, was struck by their design. He proposed they might have been used for electroplating, to deposit a thin layer of gold onto silver objects, creating gilded religious artifacts or jewelry. Modern experiments confirm the possibility. A faithful replica filled with an electrolyte can generate just over 1 volt of electricity, enough for a faint tingling sensation or, over time, to facilitate a simple electroplating process. The controversy lies not in whether it works, but in its intended purpose. No electroplated objects from that era have been definitively identified, leading skeptics to suggest the jars were simply secure containers for sacred scrolls. Yet the meticulous construction, with an asphalt seal that perfectly insulates the two metals except at the top, argues for a more sophisticated function. Could this current have been used for religious spectacle, creating a mysterious buzz for worshippers touching a sacred statue? Might it have been an early form of electrotherapy, a novelty for a wealthy patron? The true purpose is a ghost in the archaeological record, a whisper of a path not taken. The knowledge of this device, whether it was a toy, a tool, or a temple object, vanished with the empires that crafted it. When the Parthian and later Sasanian empires fell, this fragile spark of electrochemical understanding was extinguished. Its loss forces a haunting question. If this basic principle of the battery had been nurtured, if its potential had been explored for just a few more generations, how much earlier would the electric age have dawned? The silent clay jar is a monument to a future that arrived 1,500 years too late. A silent, wooden library sits scattered across the world's museums, its pages carved from dark, polished wood. These are the Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island, and they contain the only known script developed in complete isolation from the rest of humanity. Their glyphs are a beautiful, enigmatic puzzle, featuring composite figures of birds with human eyes, crouching dancers, and geometric patterns that seem to pulse with meaning. The writing itself flows in a pattern called reverse boustrophedon, where one line is read left to right, then the next line is physically turned upside down to be read right to left, a complex and deliberate system that proves this was no casual doodling. It was a sophisticated written language born from the minds of a people who navigated the vast Pacific to create a society entirely on their own. Yet today, not a single person on Earth can read a word of it. The end of this knowledge was swift and brutal. In the 1860s, Peruvian slave raiders carried off nearly half the island's population, including, it is believed, the last of the learned elders who held the key to the script. The survivors who returned brought smallpox and tuberculosis, devastating the community further. Within a single generation, the chain of transmission was irrevocably broken. By the time anthropologist Catherine Routledge arrived in the early 20th century, she found only fragments of memory. Islanders could recall with sorrow the ceremonial recitations, the sound of the chants that once accompanied the tablets, but the meaning behind the carved symbols was gone. They had become beautiful, silent objects. What profound knowledge died with those last readers? The tablets might hold the island's true history, a record of the epic voyages that settled that remote land. They could be astronomical charts tracking the stars that guided their ancestors across the ocean. Or perhaps they contain creation myths and sacred prayers, the entire spiritual worldview of a unique civilization, now locked away behind an unbreakable code. The loss of Rongorongo is a uniquely tragic story of intellectual extinction. It demonstrates that a complex and brilliant invention can emerge anywhere, even on the most isolated island, but it can be erased forever by a single, devastating contact, leaving behind only ghosts of meaning that we can see but never truly hear. These stories of vanished genius share a tragic and recurring pattern. Political collapse, as we saw with the fall of Rome, did not just topple governments, it shattered the institutions that funded advanced concrete research and supported a professional military medical corps. Cultural suppression, brutally enacted by Spanish conquistadors burning Maya codices and outlawing the Quipu, deliberately severed the living connection to entire systems of knowledge. Simple economic change could be just as destructive as when the Roman economy's reliance on slave labor removed any incentive to develop Heron's steam engine into a practical power source. And again, we see the danger of knowledge compartmentalization, where a single, fiercely guarded secret like the formula for Greek fire or the craftsmanship of the Nubian composite bow was known only to a small, specialized group, making that technology exquisitely vulnerable to the death of its masters. The historian James Burke perfectly captured this fragility when he noted that technology, like art, is a soaring exercise of the human imagination, one that can be easily grounded by social upheaval. Our journey through these 25 lost inventions proves his point. Technological progress is not an inevitable, ever upward climb. It is a path that can be lost, a flame that can be snuffed out when the specific conditions that allow it to burn, stable institutions, open transmission of knowledge, and cultural continuity are taken away. This forces a sobering question for our own time. What advanced technologies do we take for granted today that could be lost to a future dark age? Our global digital infrastructure, for instance, depends on a complex chain of rare earth mining, sophisticated manufacturing, and constant software updates. If that chain were broken, how long would it take for the knowledge to build a single microchip to fade into myth? Understanding these ancient patterns of loss is more than an academic exercise. It is a vital lesson in the importance of preserving knowledge widely, of building resilient and distributed systems for innovation, rather than concentrating expertise in a few hands. The silent libraries and abandoned workshops of the past urge us to learn from their disappearance, so that the soaring exercises of our own imagination do not become the next chapter in this long story of forgetting.